Here we are again in Erik Durant's studio. Mr. Durant is a sculptor in the north end of New Bedford at the Hatch Street Studios. Give us a little bio of yourself, what you've done over the years, and what got you into sculpting, Mr. Durant.
Sure. Well, welcome back. I'm glad to be doing this interview again and moving along. A little bit about my background.
You're also a teacher at Bristol Community College, right?
I am a professor of art at Bristol. Yes, I've been there for about 10 years. I've been making sculpture. I would say making sculpture professionally since the mid to late 90s. I went to Southern Connecticut State University and finished up there around 97.
What attracted you to art?
I have been on the art track probably most of my life. So as a young child, I was fascinated with action figures and comic books.
Huh, that's interesting.
And that was actually my true introduction to figurative art. I used to spend hours playing with action figures, but I would move the figures around and then I would set them up in all these ways, and I was always setting up scenes. So I wasn't really actively playing as much as I was sort of staging and directing. I even used to take photographs of them and like light smoke bombs behind them so that they looked cool. And
how old were you when you?
8, 9 years old.
Very
I don't know why I
interesting.
had smoke bombs at the time, but that's another question. But yeah, so I was always sort of on the art track, and I always drew. But in terms of drawing, it was always comic book people and things like that. By the time I finished high school, I was very uncertain as to what to do, so I joined the Navy and floated around in the ocean for a little bit, which was a relatively good experience. And in addition, it also helped me to go to college afterwards. So I started at Southern Connecticut State in like 94. I think 94 I started, did my degrees there. I actually have a bachelor's degree in history with a minor in anthropology, and I was taking art classes in addition to that. And then I did 2 more years of all studio art and art history classes following that. After that, I took a couple of years off, lived the artist life. I had a studio and
Where?
In New Haven, Connecticut. That's where I'm from. I had a studio in New Haven and worked and made art and did that until I was ready to apply to graduate school. Applied to graduate school and
Where was that?
I came up here to UMass Dartmouth, and so I went to the CVPA for 3 years and did the graduate program in sculpture.
What is CVPA?
The College of Visual and Performing Arts at UMass Dartmouth.
Okay.
So while I was at UMass, I was studying sculpture and really didn't have any intentions of staying in the area, but when I finished up, I ended up renting a studio here, and then a couple of years after that, I got offered a teaching position at Bristol Community College. I taught there as an adjunct for a couple of years, and then I ended up getting a full-time position, and now I've been at Bristol Community College for the past 10 years. So
You've won several awards, I believe, and you've gone to various exhibitions in other areas of the country, I believe.
So I've been showing my work since the late 90s, and I've won various things at shows, but we've been really sort of have ramped up the exhibitions over the past year and a half or so. My wife helps me quite a bit with applying to shows and marketing and branding my work, trying to get into galleries, etc. Last year, in 2018, we were in 18 different shows, which is a pretty big number.
Whereabouts?
I showed everywhere from Portland, Oregon, to Wausau, Wisconsin. We were at the Marietta Cobb Museum in Atlanta, or outside of Atlanta. whole bunch of different places. Duxbury, we won last year. We won Best in Show at Duxbury Art Museum, which is somewhat local here. For the most part, I show outside of the area. There's a lot of good opportunities for representational figurative art and throughout the world.
Do you see the artist as a sort of a god who's creating his own little universe in the work of art? Art has been defined by Ayn Rand as a selective recreation of reality according to what the artist thinks is most important about the universe as a whole. A metaphysics. In other words, art brings philosophical abstractions down to man's senses, because those abstractions are often very difficult to understand, to connect to concrete reality. But the artwork is a concretization of philosophy. What do you think of that?
I guess in thinking about the physicality of it and making it real, that's of course something that art does, especially someone like me. I make bronze figurative sculpture,
yeah.
So I'm attempting to illustrate ideas and thoughts that I have in a way that other people can see them. Otherwise I'm just talking about them. And there's something about making something concrete and formal. As to things about, I'm uncomfortable with referring to relationships between artists and divinities. I think I mentioned to you once before that I think that there's a reason why many religions throughout the world have equated the creation of human beings with materials like clay, because the impulse to create exists in all of us and has for a long time. And in fact, when you go back in the historical record, there's a connection between the rise of certain types of thought, especially relating to an afterlife, and the birth of art. So at the same sort of moment, if I have my history right here, there's some kind of connection between when we started thinking about there's evidence that human beings are thinking about more, and all of a sudden, objects and images start appearing in the historical record. So those things are sort of connected in some kind of way. As to whether or not they're associated with divinities, I don't know that I'm qualified to even to even reflect on that.
Well, they're always symbols of something that the artist in this culture values.
Yeah.
Whether it's rational order or irrationality or the supernatural.
Well, and that's what I do. We looked at some of my different works and some of those things, and I had some conversations about here and now. For me, I don't feel like I can make historical work. I make work. The work that I'm making in 2019 is that's all I can make. I make things based on my experiences in my life. My interpretations of narratives and stories that I've heard, where I live, what I have access to. So all of those things kind of in certain ways come together, and that is what informs, fuels, allows my work to happen.
And yet you're very strongly influenced by classical Greek art. There's a lot of the heroism of a lot of your figures, the heroic, and even there's some romanticism, perhaps closer to our own present era.
Well, and that's probably, truth be told, that's probably a product of growing up in the Star Wars generation. So for me, as I was born in 1973. I'm squarely in that sort of Star Wars world that was influenced by. George Lucas, who was influenced by Joseph Campbell. So those things fueled my entire childhood. So it wasn't until I was in college that I learned about Joseph Campbell and learned about George Lucas's relationship to Campbell and how the whole sort of Star Wars mythology was written based on various myths throughout history. And that's what one of the things that, it wasn't that I hadn't known about myths before, but those things sort of, opened up all of those things. So, do I approach them from a romantic point of view? Well, of course.
Well, that's true, but you are eclectic. You seem to have a number of different points of view in the various works of art I see here.
Well, that's probably that's more a product of the 21st century. So I'm very much, and I think that being an artist, maybe some artists pretend or try to be from another point in time. As much as I would love to have lived in Florence in the 1500s, I didn't. I was born in New Haven, Connecticut in the 1970s. I'm living in New Bedford, Massachusetts in 2019, making work, that I make now. I show my work on various online platforms. So that's a huge part of my life is making sculpture and then putting that work online for the world to see. So.
Do you have one unifying theme in your mind when you create a work of art?
And I can talk about them in certain ways. Probably the main unifying theme for me is the figure. So I've always been figurative. I was when I was a little kid drawing superheroes, I was figurative. When I was in art school in the early 2000s and late 1990s and early 2000s, when it was not cool to be figurative, I was figurative then. It was a constant battle when I was in undergraduate school to make figurative work and to justify that.
Would you talk about that a little bit?
Well, art school at various times is a product of the people that teach in those institutions. So. People who are tenured in art schools in the mid 1990s, most of them went to school in the 70s and 80s. So I think that a lot of times what you're getting in art school is not as much a reflection of what's going on in the art world at that moment in time as what the people who are instructing in it when they sort of came up. Maybe that's advocating for instructors who are not necessarily younger, but more in the here and now. If you come and study with me at Bristol Community College or any of my private workshops that I have here at the studio, I'm an active participant in the art world right now, and the art world in 2019 is experiencing something of a figurative renaissance. It's been building for the past 15 or 20 years, and there are a group of us out there, a lot of friends of mine from the National Sculpture Society, which is very figuratively based, which are sort of, we came up 15 or 20 years ago, and longing for things that were more representational, more classically oriented in terms of academic art, more illustrative. So I think there's we live in this world that's so enormous right now, and we live in a world where everybody has a voice right now. That you have to learn how to self-edit some of those things.
Well, there's a lot of potential now.
Yeah. So.
Do you find that liberating?
I find it enormously liberating. I enjoy that. For the most part, I can go to an enormous variety of places in this world. I can do an enormous amount of things. I have a 9-year-old son, and I have another son on the way. I have to think about the possibilities that they will have. My kid's already done more at 9 years old than I probably did before I was 20. That's a wonderfully liberating thing to me.
Do you want your art to inspire people?
Oh, absolutely.
How
Absolutely.
so? How so? I mean, I say that in contrast to modernism, in which the artists wanted people to feel that nothing was possible any longer. There was just, everything would stop. Everything was negative. Everything was attacked. And you're going against this.
Oh, I don't know that. I don't know that yeah, I can't speak for what those people were doing, you know, and I think that frequently, you know, what the art critics say that those artists were doing and what those artists may or may not have been doing. I don't know that there's always a connection between those things.
Well, I
You know,
was
for
thinking
me-
just the work itself, just the artworks themselves, never mind what the critics say.
Well, for me, I mean, I've never known an artist that didn't, you know, I guess inspire is a sort of, you know, tough one. You know, how I define inspire and how someone else might, you know, interpret that word might be a little bit different. You know, do I want people to look at my work and have a positive relationship? Absolutely. Have there been artists in the past who want to, you know, make people feel bad when they look at their work? Yeah, but that work fell short because people looked at it and they felt bad and then they walked away. You know, I want people to look at my work and, you know, come back and want to look at it again. You know, so, you know, you have to make work that's visually interesting. You have to make work that that engages people. You know, inspire. I don't know what I'm necessarily inspiring them towards, but I want to engage them. You know, and I do that in a number of different ways. I think that when you make figurative art, you know, figurative art, people automatically relate to it because it's figurative. It's human. We are humans. You know, I'm always talking about this thing about, you know.
Well, people are not born as modernists. You know, they have to be educated into it. You're right. Most people have some respect for concrete reality. They have some respect for values. Right.
Well, again, you sort of, you know, keep bringing up the modernists. I don't, you know, I don't feel that I've ever even fully lived in that time period.
That's
you know,
interesting.
I think that, I don't like the term postmodernism, but by most definitions, we live in a postmodernist global you know, society that's very different from, you know, that other world. So the only way that I understand that is historically, and that historical understanding is debatable. So, you know, what one person understands or what another person understands based on what they've read or, you know, what someone else has read, I don't know. I prefer to talk about what I do know. You know, I know the world that I grew up in, and, you know, I know the world that I live in at this moment in time.
Thank you very much for having me over here, Mr. Durant. Is there anything that you'd like to sum this up with?
No, I very much appreciate you coming to visit me, looking at my work. As I was saying before, you know, I make work because I want to share it with people. I want people to come and engage with it. I hope that the work is accessible to people and that it resonates and, you know, hopefully, you know, elicits some kind of positive reaction. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it a little bit more.